Well, this morning we are going to begin our series on marriage. And we're going to be taking some time and we're just going to be looking at what marriage is and how can we have a better marriage. So can we just get one thing out of the way? Can we just clear the air on one thing this morning? Marriage is hard, right? It's hard. We all thought, because Disney told us that it would be awesome and happily ever after, we thought it would be happily ever after. But we learned that there was a little bit that came after. So just right from the get-go, if you have a spouse that's sitting next to you, I want you to turn and I want you to look at them and I want you to repeat after me, okay? Say, being married to you, come on, you got to say it, is the best thing ever. Okay. You thought I was going to say something bad, but I wasn't. You see, it was funny this morning when we as a family were all sitting down and we were eating our breakfast and everything. My son, my 4-year-old Tristan, was looking at us and he's like, Mommy, do you have boyfriends or girlfriends? She's like, I have girlfriends. I said, you don't have any boyfriends? No. She's like, well, I've got one. And he goes, who? What's his name? She says, Chris. And he looks at her. He goes, that guy? And she's like, yes. And he goes, Mom, husbands and wives can't be friends. I'm like, wow. But if we're really honest, that's how some of us think sometimes. When we get into a relationship and sometimes things get hard, we begin to sit there and think, you know what? It's hard for husbands and wives to be friends. And our goal, and here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that as we begin looking at some of these different aspects of marriage and different truths in everything, we will learn how we can really, truly be friends in our marriages. How we can look at our spouse and say, you are my best friend. That is my honest hope and my goal. And if you're not married, but you're hoping to be married at some time, just store all of this away because it's good information that you will need later. So today we're going to talk just briefly about what is that foundational thing. If you had to pick one thing to base your entire marriage off of, what would that be? That one thing. And I'm going to go ahead and give you the answer so that you know where we're going. That one thing is value. It's value. How do you value your husband or your wife? That is the key thing. That's what we're going to look at, is how you value that other individual. So, first thing we got to ask, what is it that makes something valuable? Right? That's actually a pretty good question. It goes beyond what is the price of something. Because we can go into the store and we can say, you know what, this is how much this is worth right now, but it could change later. You see, I've got this wonderful device right here. I've got an iPhone. Now, it's not the iPhone 6, I wish it was, but it's not. But I didn't have $500 to drop on one, right? But an iPhone carries a certain amount of value. And there's two reasons it carries value. The first reason is because who it's made by. If I came to you and I said, I've got an iPhone, but it doesn't have that little thing right there, it doesn't have Apple on it, it wasn't made by Apple, do you really think it's going to be worth anything? No. The quality of which something is made will help determine its value. The quality of it and also the brand of it, if we're just downright honest. There are certain clothes, there are certain pairs of jeans that will cost you $100. I don't know why, but some people actually spend that much on a pair of jeans. I go to Ross, $20 right there. But because it doesn't have a certain brand, a certain name brand on it, it's not worth as much. Now there's another aspect to value. Because the first part is all great and good and everything, but the second part is really what comes into play. This is where it really begins to click and where value really truly comes in. And value is primarily determined by what someone is willing to pay for it. Right? You can have baseball cards that are as rare as can be, but if nobody wants to pay the amount you want for it, it's not worth that much. Plain and simple. Value really and truly is determined by what someone is willing to pay for it. What is someone willing to do? The wonderful thing about this iPhone is it was free. It wasn't really free. I had to renew a contract and all of that garbage. But I didn't have to pay several $100s. Now the new one, because there's a greater value on it, costs a lot more. They're not giving that one away free because more people want it. Now, to kind of make this point, I went online and I began researching and looking up what is some of the craziest stuff that people have bought on eBay. Yeah, What were some of the things that really doesn't have that much value, but people were willing to spend a lot of money? So I've got a little bit of a list. In 2011, clippings of Justin Bieber's hair sold for $40,668. Makes no sense to me. In 2000, Justin Timberlake's half-eaten French toast that was left behind at an interview sold for $1,025. People paid money for that. A cornflake, I love this. A cornflake shaped like Illinois sold for $1,350 on eBay. Wow. A Dorito shaped like the Pope's hat sold for $1,209. It makes no sense. And this last one I understand. Back in 2012, when Hostess announced that it was closing all of its factories, a box of 10 Twinkies sold for $60. That makes sense to me. But the value of something is really and truly in the eye of the beholder. If somebody gave me clippings of Justin Bieber's hair, I wouldn't even touch it. I don't want that. Get that blonde junk out of here, I don't need that. I don't want that. If somebody tried to sell me a cornflake shaped like Illinois, I'd laugh at them because I don't find the value in it. But somebody did. And now it's recorded. And now there's all of these things. See, value is all in the eye of the beholder. What is something worth to you? So I want us to talk about this because when you really begin to look at value and the idea of adding value to your spouse, because that's where we're going with this. If you can add value to your husband or to your wife, your marriage will be better. I mean, I would almost guarantee it. If you are consistently adding value to the other person, it will be better. And to be honest, if the other person's not willing to do it, you're doing your part and they've got to figure it out too. See, it takes two to do all of this. But before you can add value to somebody, before you can add value to someone else's life, you have to first understand that you have value. Right? Plain and simple. You can't give what you don't have. You can't give somebody value if they don't value you first. So let's look at this. How about our value? We're going to be in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. And I want to give you just a little bit of background on this. Because what's happened is at the very beginning, we believe that God created the heavens and the earth. He established everything and everything in it. And He created all the animals, all the birds, all of these things. And He comes to the end of His creation. And every day He's finished, He has looked at all of it and He said, it is good. But then He comes to the point where He begins to create man. And this is what He says, and it reads in Genesis 1, 26 through 28. It says, Then God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God He created him. Male and female He created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish and of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And then after all of the creation, he goes into a little bit more. And then at the very end, instead of saying it is good, he says it is very good. Now, you might be sitting here and you might say, well, I don't really believe all the creation thing. I lean more towards evolution. And we're not going to get into that argument today. I think you're wrong, but we're not going to get in there. But if you still take this principle of we were created special and you apply it, it'll still have incredible benefits. You can still apply this even if you question some of those more foundational things. Okay? And I want to just clear that up from the beginning. That's a discussion we can have at another time. But this idea that we have been made in the image of God, I mean, you think about it. God has gone through and created everything. He created all of the animals. He created all the fish, all the birds. He created the mountains. He created the planets, the galaxies, the suns, all of these things. And then he gets to the end and he says, now, let's finish it off by creating something in our image. Let's create something that resembles us. Let's create something that is fashioned in the likeness of us. You see, men and women, all of us, every single person in this room has been created in the likeness of God. Now, what does that mean? Created in the image of God, created in the likeness of God. What does that mean? That means that you have attributes of your life that resemble God. That doesn't mean that we all look physically like God. It's not like that. Look around the room. We all look different. It'd be boring if we all looked the same. But we all look different. We're not physically bearing that resemblance, but instead we've got different parts of us that resemble God. We're creative, just as He was. We're passionate, just as He is. We have emotion, just like He does. Did you know that God gets mad? Just like we do. Did you know that God gets jealous just like we do? Did you know that God hopes for things and wants things just like we do? See, we are made in the likeness of God. And just like God, we have been given a soul that lasts for eternity. Our physical bodies will die, yes, but we believe that we will keep going. That we will continue even after death. So we have been created in the likeness of God. Now, what does that mean for you? That means that you have value simply based on the fact of whose image you bear. This phone has value because of the apple placed on the back of it. And you have value because you were created in the image of God. And to put that on the reverse side, your spouse has value. Plain and simple. Sometimes we don't treat each other like we have value, right? We just don't. There's different aspects, different things that we do that show that we don't really believe somebody has value. We talk down to them. We put them down. We call them stupid. We say that they're dumb, that they need to just shut up and stop talking. We get mad. We yell. We degrade people. Sometimes we degrade our spouses. We go and we do these things that bring them down. That's not showing them the value of who they are. And that value is simply based on the fact that your husband, your wife, was made in the image of God. I mean, just if you begin to let that sink in just a little bit, it will begin to change your perspective. My spouse was made in the image of God, and because of that, they have value. I mean, we don't treat people, at least we shouldn't treat people the same way we treat our animals. I mean, in the past, people have done that. Even today, people will treat other people like animals. They treat them like dogs, like cattle, like whatever else. And why? Because they don't understand that that person bears the image of God. Abuse is an image of God problem. If you are abusing your husband or your wife, you need to stop. They are worth more than that. If you are in an abusive relationship, get out. Get away. Get to safety. Plain and simple. I'm not saying leave, file for divorce, all of that. I'm saying if you are in an abusive relationship, you are worth more than that. Get away from it. Period. And if you are the abuser, stop and find help. Period. Your spouse is worth more than that. And let me just clarify, because this whole abuse thing, typically we think of the man being the abuser, but ladies, you can be just as abusive. If you're being abusive, stop it. You need to stop, and you need to begin looking at your spouse as if they have value because of whose image they bear. The other part, what is someone willing to pay for your spouse? Here's the interesting thing. Remember how we said that value is really primarily based on what someone's willing to pay? Right? I mean, in the old days, when someone went to get a wife, they would do a dowry. You know, they would come and they'd give, 15 oxen or goats or whatever, and some had more value than others, right? I mean, the princess of a king is going to bring in, gobs and gobs of gold. The servant girl is going to get a chicken, okay? That's how it was in that day. You went to their dad and you said, "Here, let me give you this so that I can take her home with me." That's what happened. Some of you are probably thinking, that's not a bad idea. You can have her, I get a hunting rifle. Whatever. And it's changed in all of that today, but the truth remains that what someone is willing to pay for somebody brings value. Now, I'm not talking about prostitution, okay? Because that's flat out wrong, dirty, sinful, degrading, and is a huge image of God problem. Pornography in the same way. What I'm talking about is, what are you willing to give of yourself for your spouse? But how many of you know all those items on eBay? There was somebody who went on there and just put a penny. And once it got up over $5, they said, "I'm out. I quit. I'm not going after this," But somebody was willing to go all the way. So really, the value of something is placed by what the highest bidder is willing to bid. And your husband and your wife has already had that value placed on them, and it's more than you could ever hope to give. The reason for that is because God has placed value on every single person. And what He was willing to pay was the life of His perfect only Son. Plain and simple. That's a high price. I mean, every other person in all of humanity has been screwed up, right? I mean, you're probably sitting here today thinking, I don't have that much value, I'm too messed up. And Jesus was the one who He was worth that. He had all of that. He was perfect. And not only was His Father, God, willing to spend that much on you, but Jesus was willing to allow Himself to be spent for you. So people already have a value, and it's a high value. You are worth more than, it doesn't matter what you've done in your life. It doesn't matter the drugs you've taken. It doesn't matter the lifestyle you've lived. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. The price has already been paid. You are worth something. You have to realize that about yourself, but then you also have to realize that about the people around you. And I'll tell you what, this will go even beyond your husband or your wife. This goes into how you treat everybody. When you begin adding value to people, it changes them. There are people in my life who make me feel valued. There's certain ones, and sometimes it surprises me. I feel valued by different people. And I'm not just talking about my spouse now. I'm talking about beyond that. When somebody comes and they add value to myself, guess what? I appreciate them, and I want to spend more time there. Why? Because I feel valued. If somebody degrades me, if somebody's putting me down, if somebody is not doing that, guess what? I don't care what you have to say. You've lost respect. It's all done. It's all gone. You don't value me, therefore, you don't have a place. Just that's how I perceive things. That's how I handle things. But there's something about when you add value to somebody else, where suddenly they're more receptive to you. Suddenly there's a softness that comes about. Why? Because they can trust you. When you add value to your husband or to your wife because of just the simple fact that they have been paid for at a high price, they are worth more than you can give, but yet they're still in your life and you treat them like that, or even just because of whose image they bear, whose likeness they carry, when you begin to treat them like that, there's something that begins to change. Now, you might be sitting here saying, you don't understand, Chris, that my wife degrades me all the time. She nags me constantly. She doesn't do anything. You know, she is, you talked about the abuse part, she's borderline. Things have grown sour, and I don't know how long I can handle it. I don't want to place value in them. I don't want to place value in her. Or maybe you wives are saying, you know what? He doesn't do anything. He's a bum. He comes in, he sits on the couch, all of this. He doesn't help with the kids. I slave, I do all of these things, but nothing happens. He doesn't value me. We're going to talk about all that next week because that's part of it. But here's what I want to say. You are responsible for how you treat people. You are not responsible for how someone else treats you. And if you will just begin to add that value, add value to them. It might be hard. Oh, it might be just, you might be gritting your teeth the whole time. Thank you for dinner. You know, hope it's not burnt. You know, whatever. As you begin doing those things, you begin adding and placing that value, it will all of a sudden begin to change them. I looked at Kathy probably a month or so ago, and I looked at her and I said, something's changed with you. And she's like, huh? Like, I don't know. I said, you've started doing some things. And what I began to notice is she started changing the way she talked just a little bit, especially around my kids. And it was in such a way where we would sit down for dinner and Kathy would look at the kids and say, thank your dad for working for the food you have today. And I'm sitting there going, where did that come from? But you know what? I'm more willing to get up in the morning and bust my tail to provide for them. I'm willing to do that. She has begun placing value in me in incredible ways just with what she says. Or she'll sit there and Tristan will say, that's mine. And she'll look and she'll say, no, you didn't pay for it. Your dad paid for everything we have. Your dad's the one. So all of this is really his. Which is a great tactic for kids, let me just say. If they want to be selfish, you say, I bought it, not you. It's great, just a, extra little piece there. But when Kathy began adding just that little bit of value to me, it changed the way I perceived her. It just did. All of a sudden, I began to appreciate her even more. I began to love her even more. If you begin to appreciate your husband or your wife, when you begin to show that value, that intrinsic value that's given to every single person, when you begin to show them that kind of value, when you show them that kind of worth, it will change them. And it's not going to be immediate. Okay? Marriage, you did not say, I do until I don't. You said, I do till death do us part. You are committed to that person. You're committed to them, which means you might have to go through a season where you are emptying yourself and you are showing all of this value to your husband or to your wife, and you're doing all of these things so that they will feel valued. And it might take time. But when you're consistent, when you keep going, it'll be incredible to change. I heard a story about a famous preacher, and I can't remember his name exactly, but a long time ago, and he wasn't a Christian. And his wife was, and she would get up and go to church, and it would make him mad. He didn't want her to go to church because he didn't like her not being home in the morning to take care of him. Right? Incredibly selfish. So what he would do is when she left in the morning to go to church, he would lock the door and lock her out of the house and would leave it locked until the next day. So this wife would come home and she prayed for her husband, and she was constant, and she would come home and she would sleep outside in the cold on the porch, waiting for her husband to get up in the morning to open the door. And when he would, she would walk in and she would say, "Good morning, husband, how was your day?" and go and make him breakfast. Some of you are like, I'd be grabbing rocks and bricks and breaking windows and setting the house on fire with him locked in it. Right? I mean, let's just be honest. A little bit of rage, a little bit of all that. It happens. Most people wouldn't, blame you at all. But she would go in and constantly add that value to her husband. He ended up getting saved. He ended up changing his life. He became a good man because of what his wife was willing to do. Show value. Your husband or your wife has value, whether you show it or not. And if you're not willing and able to show them that, I'll just give you a little bit of a warning in this. Let's just be honest. Sometimes they will begin to look other places for that value. Doesn't make it right, doesn't make it acceptable, nothing. But people are drawn to other people who make them feel valued. So value them. Look at them and begin to understand that God has placed a value on this person higher than I could ever pay. And because of that, I will treat them better than I think they should be treated. Add value to your spouse. Out of all of the things, all of the things that you can do, all the things we're going to talk about, all of the different topics that we're going to go through, adding value and seeing them as made in that image, in that likeness of God, is crucial. If you can't do that, the rest of it doesn't make sense. That has to be the starting point for any healthy relationship. And you might say, well, there are certain things they do that drive me absolutely nuts. And we're going to get into that. In fact, next week we're going to be looking at, because we were made by God, because we have been designed in a sense, then we've been made a specific way. We have certain things that we have been created for. And because of sin, because of the things that have come in, because we're all just messed up, we tend to lean in different directions, and we tend to rebel against what we were created to do and what we were created for. And chances are, it's what drives you nuts. So we're going to talk more about that next week. So make sure that you're coming, make sure you're in all this, because I'm hoping to shed some light on those things that just irritate you. Those things that just drive you nuts. But first, you have to add value. So I want to give you just a couple of really practical tips on how you can add value to somebody. Real quick, real practical. Say thank you. Acknowledge what they do for you. I'm horrible at this. Kathy will clean the house, and I walk in and don't say a word. And she's like, you didn't even notice. Yeah, I did. I just didn't say anything. That's something I need to work on. But there's days where Kathy will send me a text while I'm at work, especially if she knows I'm frustrated, and she'll say, thank you for all the hard work you do. Say thank you. You'd be surprised what it'll do. Thank them for what they do. Thank them for the small things. That will add value. Another thing is put away your selfishness, okay? Put away the things that you want and begin looking at what they want. Okay? Husbands and wives, let's be honest, relationships, some things are easy, but finding a place to eat is not, right? Begin to defer to the other person. And I'm not saying in a constant back and forth, what do you want to eat? I don't know. What do you want to eat? I don't know. Don't do that. But say, you know what? What's your favorite place? Where do you enjoy? Where do you want to go? Add value. Doesn't matter if you don't like it. Doesn't matter if it's some place that you think is just nasty. Put them a little bit higher and just add that value. Another thing to do, when you wake up in the morning, look at them. Tell them you love them. And then in your mind, take time and thank God that He has entrusted you with someone so valuable. See if that doesn't change your thinking. See if that doesn't change your thinking. Take time. Say thank you. Put your selfishness aside. Do something nice for them. Defer to them. And then thank God that He trusted you with someone so valuable. Those things, I honestly believe those things will begin to add value into your relationship. And when that value begins to be built up, your marriage will begin to change. Your spouse will begin to change. Do not wait for them to do it first. Do not say, I will add value when they first value me. You're an idiot if you do that. Just plain and simple. Hate to say it, but it's foolish to do that. You take the initiative. And you guys, plain and simple, we're going to talk next week about what it means to be a guy, what it means to be a man in the house, and a real man and all of that. You take the initiative. You do it. You dedicate yourself to loving your spouse more than you love yourself. You take the initiative. I will take the initiative as well. Because, guys, I'll be honest, I'm 29 years old. I've been married 9 years, almost 9 years. To me, I'm getting old. To some of you, you think I'm so stinking young and I've got no experience and no business telling you how to have a good marriage. To be fair, I'm stealing most of this from other books and people I've listened to, okay? First man to make it into heaven was a thief, so it's all good. Take these principles and add them, and I do believe that your marriage will begin to change.